then I'm going to ask everyone to kindly take note of the emergency exits in the room. There's the door through which you entered. There is a door to my right, and there's another one at the back. In the event of an emergency, the protocol staff will direct or escort you out to the lobby, and then Beaches, Turks and Caicos will take over. Just take note. You ready? You ready, sir? Okay. I'm going to ask everyone to kindly stand, please. The 4th Annual Conference of the Commonwealth Caribbean Association of Integrity Commissions and Anti-Corruption Bodies, under the auspices of the Commonwealth Secretariat, is now in session. I invite the persons who are processing with the flags to come in as your country is called. Antigua and Barbuda. Barbados. Belize. Cayman Islands. Commonwealth of Dominica, Grenada, the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Jamaica, Saint Lucia, the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, United Kingdom and the Turks and Caicos Islands. Kindly remain standing for the national anthem and the national song by the Long Bay High School Choir.
God save our gracious
standing as I invite Bishop Clarence Williams, a former commissioner of the TCI Integrity Commission, to do the invocation.
I'm going to pray. Thank you very much, Reverend Chairwoman. God bless you. I'm going to say a prayer for all of you, Her Excellency, and for Madam Premier, soon Prime Minister, I hope, and for the Speaker of the Turks and Caicos. I pray for them every day, and when I saw our good brother Eugene, I said I forgot to include the Integrity Commission in my daily prayers. And to all members of the government and the various commissioners, commission, and other bodies of good governance. Last week I spent 8 days in Guyana, from one part to the other, Georgetown to Linden in the hinterland. And after seeing all of this, I said to myself, when I come to pray here, I better say to each of you that you should save yourself from this generation. But then again, it is best to pray. It's always good to pray. And your task, if you never had the blessings of the Lord Jesus Christ, the task you're faced in the various countries, you do need the Lord. So I'm going to pray. Would you just bow your heads? Almighty God, through your Son, Jesus Christ, by the power of the Holy Ghost, I invite you to come and stay and abide with all deliberations, be in the consultations, and those who are speaking, be in the speech, about the speech, that all men may know that deliverance and truth comes primarily through you and in you, and the practice thereof to the enlightenment of each country. And those who have come from abroad, we thank you, O Lord, for the safe passage into this our beautiful country. And as they stay, speak to their minds and their hearts, that such deliberation will be only in you and about you. Give us of your great grace and your great power to understand your will and purpose for all of us. I pray through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. If you'll be so kind to repeat with me the Lord's Prayer as recorded in Matthew. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you very much, Bishop. You may be seated. Your Excellency, the Acting Governor, Mrs. Anya Williams, the Honorable Charlene Cartwright Robinson, Premier of the Turks and Caicos Islands, Honorable Dwayne Taylor, Speaker of the House of Assembly, Her Ladyship Chief Justice Mrs. Margaret Ramsey Hale, Chief Justice of the Turks and Caicos Islands, Ministers of Government, Honorable Charles Washington Mizik, Leader of the Opposition, members of the House of Assembly, Honorable Rondalee Brathwaite Knowles, Attorney General, our keynote speaker, Professor Trevor Monroe, Executive Director of National Integrity Action Jamaica, senior government officials, heads of departments, permanent secretaries, directors, constitutional officers, Dr. Roger Correntine, interim advisor and head of public sector governance at the Commonwealth Secretariat, Sir David Simmons, former chairman of the Integrity Commission, Mr. Martin Green, acting chairman of the Integrity Commission of the Turks and Caicos Islands, current and former commissioners of the Integrity Commission, director and staff of the Integrity Commission, heads of and representatives of integrity commissions and anti-corruption bodies in the Caribbean, Ms. Virginia de Abajo Maquis, UNODC representative, Ms. Coralie Pring, Latin American representatives, members of the clergy, chairmen and directors of statutory bodies, private sector organization representatives, media personnel, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, students. I now call to order the 4th Annual Conference of the Commonwealth Caribbean Association of Integrity Commissions and Anti-Corruption Bodies. I invite Mr. Eugene Oteonye, QC, Chairman of the Ccaicacb, to come and bring welcome and opening remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I am particularly grateful that you have done the harder part for this assignment for me. I like protocol a lot, but I don't like establishing it. I'm so afraid to do so. But even this afternoon, Madam Chair, it's been well done, and I accept what you have established. Thank you. On behalf of the Commonwealth Caribbean Integrity Commissions and anti-corruption bodies, on behalf of the Turks and Caicos Island Integrity Commission, on behalf of our major sponsors, the Commonwealth Secretariat, and of course the Turks and Caicos Island government, I want to welcome all of you this afternoon to our 4th annual conference. Last year, around April, when we were in Jamaica, the Turks and Caicos Island Integrity Commission had the opportunity and was told, listen, you are going to host this conference. We were elated. And I remember from Jamaica indicating to the governor we are in for hosting this conference. And I think I did so to the Premier, or he communicated to the Premier. And usually I think the Commonwealth Secretariat will want to find out whether you are able to do so, what kind of support are you going to get. But that last year when we were nominated to host, I was very sure, I was very confident that Turks and Caicos Islands have taken ownership of fighting corruption. And I told Commonwealth Secretariat so. So Roger, you can see they have come out in their full force. I don't need to tell you anything. We have the backing of the Turks and Caicos people, government, and everybody that matter, young people. We have their backing to fight corruption in Turks and Caicos Islands. So while we are very excited and beginning to plan, I remember writing to them from the aircraft, what I called building momentum. And I wrote to the executive committee. I said, let's get cracking with this thing. And I was so excited coming back home. 4 months after, this was April, May, June, July, August. And now September. Now you all know what happened. And after the back-to-back devastating hurricanes that passed through these islands, I thought that that opportunity, that dream had evaporated. I know that it was not just Turks and Caicos alone. I know that there are other members of the association that were heavily impacted upon by the hurricane. But as you can see, by God's grace and mercy, we are here as if it never happened. So I'm grateful to God for sparing our lives, and I'm grateful to Him for enabling us to bounce back and to find ourselves celebrating in this fashion. And I want to say, ladies and gentlemen, that 2 of our members, Dominica and Antigua and Barbuda in particular, they were badly hit, and you knew about it. Guess what? They are also here. And what she's telling me, actually, when Dominica said they were coming, I felt like crying. Barbuda, Antigua and Barbuda, we didn't get in touch with them until maybe 3 days ago. And they just like, we have to be there. We will be there. And I thought, corruption, fight what you will, we are winning. We are going to win. So I want to thank all of you for coming this afternoon, for gracing this wonderful occasion for us. We will be here for 3, 4, 5 days. It's going to be hard work, counting the cost of corruption in the region and endeavoring to engage everyone in the fight against corruption. We know it's not been easy. It's not going to be easy. But all I'm going to ask you to do, delegates in particular, is that there will be hard work, but there will be time to play. On Thursday, we will have a free day, just to enable you to unwind, go to some of the islands, and come back to fish fry. Some of you have never been to the island before, quite a number of them actually. But you are in for a treat. You will never, never forget Turks and Caicos Islands. It is a country beautiful by nature and aspirationally corruption-free by choice. Welcome.
I invite Dr. Roger Corentang, Interim Advisor and Head of the Public Sector Governance Section, Commonwealth Secretary, to come and bring greetings. Roger.
Thank you, Reverend. I must say, riding on the back of my senior colleague, Eugene, I also will call upon the protocol to be observed. When I was coming to Turks and Caicos, I thought I was the only one who was going to be new on this island or coming here for the first time. Then I realized that my own colleagues from the Caribbean islands, most of them have never been here before. So I think we are on the same page. We will explore the island together. So I must say, I bring you greetings from the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, the Right Honorable Patricia Scotland, QC. He wished to have been here herself, but other engagement coincided with the date, so he couldn't be here. But she promised that next year she will be here, or whoever country will host it on the islands in the Caribbean, he will be here, flesh and blood. But for me, it is a special pleasure to join you at this 4th Commonwealth Caribbean Association of Integrity Commissions and Anti-Corruption Bodies meeting here in your beautiful islands, Turks and Caicos. We are here because of one thing: corruption. We know each year about 1.5 to 2 trillion US dollars is lost from the global economy in bribes, not counting the foregone tax revenues and economic growth. The developing countries lose 1 trillion annually to corporate transgressions, most of it traceable to activities of companies with secret ownerships. Recently, the Commonwealth Secretary General, Patricia Scotland, warned of a global tsunami of corruption, demanding a coordinated international response. In her words, and I quote, "Corruption is poisonous, corrosive, vicious, and an enemy of sustainable development. It destroys people's confidence in their leaders, their politicians, and their country," unquote. Corruption continues to be one of the greatest challenges of our time, a problem that threatens the continued survival and development of our society. It has been rightly described as a crime against humanity because of the implication on our lives and livelihood of all, especially the poorest. It undermines democracy and rule of law, distorts market, erodes quality of life, allows organized crime to flourish and trigger needless gun war and bloodshed on our streets. And indeed, much has been lost and is still being lost. A report that may be frequently cited is one by the one campaign group titled $1 trillion Scandal, which, as I've mentioned, 1.5 to 2 million trillion dollars are lost through corruption. So there is a clear correlation between corruption levels and a country's or region's degree of social, economic, and political development. It seems not accidental that nations with the highest perceived levels of corruption also have the lowest or have the lower levels of development. And also reinforming institutions, strengthening controls in financials, and providing more participation are essential but not enough if public officers, holders, are not willing to set examples of transparency and accountability and make every effort to implement the laws and the regulation on the books. Of course, political will, as we all know, is a key determinant of a nation's ability to fight corruption. One key to success in building effective anti-corruption commissions rests in the willingness of the proponent of good governance to share their experiences and to work together to develop a greater knowledge of best practices. Now, this can happen only when anti-corruption bodies themselves, including integrity commissions, approach the challenge with a fresh and open mind. A critical challenge relates to the ability of anti-corruption bodies to publicly seen to be credible. These institutions need to enjoy public trust to be effective. The greater the public support that anti-corruption bodies and commissions can foster, the more likely they are able to deliver on their mandates. So I wish to underscore the importance of this conference. It is useful to recall that the Commonwealth Heads of Government at their meeting in Durban, South Africa in 1999 endorsed the framework for Commonwealth principles on promoting good governance and combating corruption. They made commitment to tackle systemic corruption, including extortion and bribery. And they reiterated these principles at their meetings in Abuja in December 2003 and Malta 2005, and recently Malta again in 2016. They urged the Commonwealth state to implement the United Nations Global Convention Against Corruption, normally known as the UNCAC, to root out both at national and international levels corruption and to adopt policies that will ensure transparency in tendering and in procurement. To this end, the Commonwealth Secretariat prioritized anti-corruption work to strengthen good governance through reduction in corruption and thereby promoting accountability and integrity in the Commonwealth. The Secretariat started off first by establishing the Association of Anti-Corruption Agencies in the largest groupings of the Commonwealth region, which is Africa. The association was set up to enable South-South collaboration and learning. And it is acknowledged that an effective approach to building institutions and to strengthen its community of practice, build professional associations, and create such opportunities for peer learning and exchange of best practices is the way to go. So the African Association, or its community of practice, seeks to broker the exchange of ideas and good practices among the Commonwealth African countries, and to encourage the sharing of experience in areas of comparative advantage, generate political buy-in process and pressures for reforms. Now, this helped to strengthen the regional cooperation through a selection of countries in the Commonwealth of Africa for benchmarking and peer learning after each conference, which has resulted in improving anti-corruption agencies' performance. For example, to date, the top 10 least corrupt countries in Africa are all Commonwealth countries in the association. So in pursuit of its commitment to institutionalize and deepen the fight against corruption within the Commonwealth Caribbean, through learning and cooperation, the Commonwealth Secretariat, under the auspices of the Grenada Integrity Commission, established the Commonwealth Caribbean Association of Integrity Commissions and Anti-Corruption Bodies in its first ever meeting that was held in that country. We have gone on to have various meetings, and today we are in Turks and Caicos for the 4th meeting of the association. I must at this juncture to pay a glowing tribute to the time that I was looking in the island, Caribbean island state, who could I work with to establish this organization? My first point of call was Dominica. I know this great personality of the Commonwealth Caribbean, the name of Mr. Julian Johnson, who have worked previously on the continent or in the region here. So I called him and said, this is what I want to do. We have done it in Africa. My next stop is Caribbean. He said, okay, what's your criteria? I said, I want a place where it will be easier for all of us to converge. We tried a lot of places. He mentioned a particular name, Monica. I said, who is Monica? He said, Grenada. My colleague there, Dame Monica Joseph. So I approached her. He said, yes, we can start it off from here. Then I got to know another lady who is with us, Lady Anande Trotman, whom I've met. I didn't want to say in my previous life because I would sound a little very old. Some years back, when I was organizing all the anti-corruption agencies to meet in Singapore to look at the Singapore experience so that we could share around the Commonwealth. So I met Lady Anandi Trotman, so I knew. So I found her there as a deputy. So, oh, okay, then I'm home. So that's the time we brought all the heads of integrity commissions and anti-corruption bodies together, and I give them the vision that this is what we want to do. They embrace it, and we have had a series of them. After Grenada, we moved to Trinidad and Tobago, Port of Spain. Then from there, we moved to Jamaica last year, and this year we are here. Now, one of the things I've noticed is that in all these countries, I learned something new, something different. In fact, today, this flag procession is something new that I've never noticed anywhere, not in Africa, not in Asia, but I've seen it in Turks and Caicos. Of course, in Jamaica, I was made under coerce to swim on a river that I've never thought I could swim in that river. So I thank those pioneers, and I want to pay a tribute to them. So anti-graft agencies heads from the region will focus on the theme, counting on the real cost of corruption and engaging everyone in the fight. So the cost of corruption, therefore, imposes on all countries and government a moral obligation to fight it with vigor and with political will. By strengthening all institutions and systems involved in law enforcement, as well as promoting a culture of transparency and accountability. While public sector corruption is the usual focus, the private sector complicity is significant, as when large multinational corporations engage in tax evasions or transfer pricing. As we notice in the African experience, or the African experience have taught us, that when fighting corruption, corruption fights back, and most of the time it wins, because the people you are fighting, they will fight back. They have all the resources. They can assess the best brains in the of lawyers, a team. In one country in Africa, they were prosecuting one person of corruption. He brought in, the legal team was about 25 legal teams in the room. So the judge was asking, what are all these people coming to do here? It tells you how they will fight back. And most of the time they win. So, therefore, we must take cognizance of that and provide adequate resources to investigate, adequately equip integrity commissions and anti-corruption bodies, protect whistleblowers and witnesses in order to win the fight. Otherwise, you can't. It's heartwarming that currently 5 Caribbean countries, the Bahamas, the Barbados, St. Vincent and Grenadine, the Dominican Republic, Commonwealth Dominica, is that the official name? And St. Lucia. St. Lucia, they rank among the 50 least corrupt countries in the whole world out of the 180, according to the Transparency International 2017 Corruption Index. So at least we have something to celebrate on the continent. Others have reported positive changes, such as new transparent mechanisms for public procurement installed in Guyana, and a consolidated anti-corruption agency to conduct investigations in Jamaica. These are all successes that the region can celebrate. So, setting up the association in 2015, the association leveraged the convening power of the Commonwealth Secretariat to sustain a network offering learning and support through South-South cooperation. Now, since then, that's about 4 years ago, we have seen a clear strengthening of the integrity commissions and anti-corruption bodies. As a result of collaboration, this network has encouraged and facilitated. As I mentioned, we have met in Grenada 2015, Trinidad and Tobago 2016, Jamaica 2017. And the group has been able to select countries for benchmarking, conducting training, and gains from peer learning. And I want to encourage that because the main reason why we formed this association is for institutions to work hand in hand together. As I've mentioned, these countries are doing very well. Others are struggling. So you need to work with each other to learn how come you are in the same region and others are doing better and others are struggling and others are lacking behind. So you learn from each other, share that experiences. That's the only way you work. Because I believe we call a concept called neighborhood effect. The best way to learn, and it has shown all over history, Industrial Revolution started by United Kingdom. Within a short possible time, the whole of the Europeans have also be able to develop because they are neighbors. They are all Caucasians. They know their thinking, their style, everything. Japan got developed first. What happened to their neighbors? Immediately they look at and what do you call Taiwan, Singapore, Malaysia, all of them. Go to US, Canada, and US. They are all developing. Why is it that Mexico is lacking behind? Because they are different. Go to India, sub-region, and Pakistan. India sent rocket to space. The following day, Pakistan sent rocket to space. Because they are the same people. You see, when you are the same group, the same people, you have the same thinking, the same psychological effect on you. You don't have to sweat to know what your neighbor is doing. You learn it like that. So that's why when you bring peoples together from the same region, confronted with the same environment and problems and challenges, they learn quicker than to export somebody from a different foreign countries to come and talk to you about corruption, how to deal with it. It will take you a long time for you to learn. So that was the idea. So I want to encourage the island states, please, after every conference, don't sit down. Crisscross the region, learn, benchmark, see what others are doing, bring it back home, amend it if you have to. And before you realize, give yourself 10, 5 years, you see what will happen. You all behave like the Barbados, the Bahamas, the Dominicans, and everybody else. And you all move. So that is the idea. Because Africa, it has shown. So these high-level review meetings offer an experience sharing opportunities for all heads of integrity commissions and anti-corruption bodies in the Commonwealth Caribbean to share experiences, to learn from each other. The conference objective will be achieved through a combination of country presentations, expert presentations, panel discussions, and group discussions, but above all, networking on and after the sessions. The Commonwealth Secretariat has prioritized small states, as endorsed by CHOGAM in Perth, Australia 2011, to focus on the multiple development challenges, not least corruption, confronting small states as a result of their inherent vulnerabilities. 32 of the Commonwealth 53 member states are classified as small states, and this number, 24, are classified as small island developing states, SIDs. The Secretariat attached high priority to supporting the integration of small states in the global economy, building their resilience and competitiveness, helping them to take advantage of the opportunities and the need and meet the challenges arising from globalization. While small states are under increasing pressure to improve their governance, to attract investment, increase competitiveness, and effectively deliver public goods and services to their citizens, good and honest government is critical. So the Commonwealth Secretariat is therefore keen and committed to support integrity commissions and anti-corruption bodies to achieve meaningful, long-lasting effort to combat corruption and to enhance good governance in the region. Finally, before I resume my seat, all delegates and invited guests, thank you very much for responding generously to our invitation to attend these conferences, fourth in the row. And let me say, heads of integrity and anti-corruption bodies in the Commonwealth Caribbean, that you find yourself in roles that can change the destiny of your nation if you deliver on your mandate. You simply cannot fail. So therefore, in closing, I would like to thank the government and the people of Turks and Caicos, the Integrity Commission, and the local organizing committees. I would like to mention names because all of you have done such important work. You have worked so hard behind the scenes to get all of us here to enjoy your beautiful islands. But when I was flying in the plane and looking across, I said, wow, this is a paradise. This is very impressive. So it is important we foster cooperation and peer learning in this daunting but surmountable battle against corruption. I have no doubt that the resolutions and the commitment that will emerge from this conference will be a game changer. It is now my privilege and pleasure to submit to the conference a video message from the Commonwealth Secretary General, the Right Honorable Patricia Scotland QC. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention.
Greetings, everyone. I am so sorry not to be able to join you in person in Turks and Caicos. Your conference is of immense importance for the Caribbean region and for the wider Commonwealth. We are confronted by multiple and multifaceted threats which exploit vulnerabilities and undermine resilience. Yet again, the Caribbean hurricane season is upon us. Climate change and extreme weather threaten to unleash unprecedented waves of destruction. The ferocious and ravenous storms of corruption are equally destructive. Housing infrastructure and access to affordable energy and other hard-won development gains are all compromised by their impact. These affect every stage of human development, from cradle to old age, from womb to tomb. Funding meant for schools and colleges is stolen, robbing our children of education, the foundation on which to fulfill their potential. Health and food security are compromised, severely impairing well-being, reducing life expectancy. As your theme so rightly makes clear, engaging everyone in the fight and raising awareness of the real cost of corruption are vital if we are to succeed in tackling bribery, fraud, and other dishonest practices which wreck lives and undermine social and economic progress. And succeed, we must. Increasingly, fraud and corruption disregard regional and national boundaries. So to match and outsmart this, we, the upholders of justice and integrity, have to work together ever more closely on preventative action and to share knowledge and innovation. That is the value of the Commonwealth collaboration and of the practical action that flows from regular and focused regional interaction, such as that being undertaken at this very conference. Similar cooperation took place 2 weeks ago at the Commonwealth Conference of Anti-Corruption Agencies in Africa. The outcomes of that conference and of your own can now be shared for wider benefit on our new Commonwealth Innovation Hub. It is a powerful means for accelerating adoption of new tools and techniques. In commending this facility to you, I wish you continuing success in your cooperation. Above all, I thank you for your commitment to upholding and deepening the impact of Commonwealth values, of counting the real cost of corruption, and of engaging everyone in the fight.
I now invite Mr. David Bowen to come and do a cultural presentation.
Good afternoon. My name is David Bowen, and I am here to present a bit of our PCI culture to you. Now, we could have brought all the dancing girls and guys out, big band playing, all kind of wonderful things to entertain you. But we felt, because many of you, it's your first time visiting our beautiful PCI, that I want to educate you about our culture, our history, and our heritage, and do it in an entertaining way. So the first thing I need is a microphone. If I can have that. I have a microphone here, and I will need a stand. And okay, I have a microphone and a stand coming. So thank you, Ms. Julia. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. All right, much better. Now, this is my grip. It's a grip. It's not a suitcase. It's a grip, okay? Now, in my grip, I have a number of things that will help me inform you about my TCI culture. So I'm going to open my grip, and please don't mind if I bend down. The first thing out of my grip, this is Sally. Sally and I are wearing the national costume of the Turks and Caicos Islands. So I want to explain exactly what that means. We are the Turks and Caicos Islands. The Turks Islands produced the white gold we called salt. Caicos Islands produced the white gold we called cotton. Sally is wearing a wonderful dress worn by a typical slave in the cotton fields, and I am wearing an upstyle scale level of a salt raker and a fisherman. But they're made from cotton, representing our white gold. There are 8 colors in the national costume. Yellow, red, white, orange, golden, tan, green, turquoise, and pink. And every color represents something about our country. First of all, yellow. Yellow represents the sun as God's glory shining equally on all the islands in our small chain. And the first island that the sun rays will touch as it rises from the east is the capital Grand Turk. The color red was chosen for Grand Turk. The color is from the fact that our national plant, the Turk's head cactus, the very top resembles that of a fez worn by men in Turkey, hence the Turks Islands. And so red was chosen to represent the island of Grand Turk and our national plant. The next island is Salt Cay. Salt. Salt Cay was the last island to produce salt in the late 70s. So white was chosen to represent the island of Salt Cay. Next, we have orange. Orange represents our fishing capital, South Caicos, where we find the beautiful spiny lobster, and the color orange was chosen to represent that country, that island rather, and our fishing industry. The golden tan represents the island of Middle Caicos, where the color is from the fact that our thatch, sometimes also known as straw, that's the color of the materials used to make our baskets, our hats. The next color is green. Green represents the island of North Caicos. North Caicos is the most fertile of all our islands. In fact, we have the best preserved plantation in all the Caribbean called Wade's Green in North Caicos. We call North Caicos the breadbasket or even the Emerald Isle, and green represents North Caicos. Turquoise represents this island based on our beautiful turquoise water that is part of our beautiful tourism industry. So turquoise is for this island, Provinciales. And finally, pink. Pink represents all the other islands and keys that are uninhabited, where you find the pink flamingo and the pink conch shells. So from sunrise to sunset, the colors of the Turks and Caicos Islands. Now, she's wearing a turquoise sash and a scarf, and I'm wearing a red one on my hat. The red for the men on their hat, the band, is the color of their hometown where they were born. I was born in Grand Turk, so I wear the red. And of course, she was born right here in Provo. I think she's probably from the Bight. So this is the national costume of the Turks and Caicos Islands. And like every national costume, it has the history, it has the heritage, it has the culture. It's a learning tool, and if I must say so, it is a beautiful costume. All right, thank you. Next from my grip, I have this. Now, I'm sure everyone knows that this is a conch shell. Yes, it's a conch shell. It's a queen conch, Strumbus gigas. However, this conch shell is a very important part of our history, culture, and heritage. You see, this conch shell is proudly displayed on our national crest and our flag. It is a national symbol, a very important symbol. This conch shell also produces food for our guests. We tell all of our guests to please go to Boogaloo's or Conch Shack or Fresh Catch to get some conch salad, conch fritter, whatever. But in the past, we relied on this conch something we call dry conch. What you do, you must do some important things. First of all, you gotta hook the conch. No one dove for conch back in the days because they couldn't swim most of the time. Also, it was very difficult for the men to dive a single conch. So they would stay in the boat and using a conch hook and a water glass, they will hook the conch. Once they hook the conch, then they go on the island, then they knock it using a hammer, they juke it in the hole to cut the connection to the conch, then they pull it, then they clean it, then they bruise it, then they hang it, then they dry it, then they eat it. All right? So you get all that together now, you can produce some wonderful dry conch. And because we are a limestone-based island, we didn't grow so much stuff. It was hard to get things. So our next door neighbor, Haiti, would give us all the stuff because our wonderful dry conch, what they call lambi, they love our conch. So we would trade our conch for things we couldn't get here. Not for money, we go there and we trade conch for things. All right? And when you come back, that's when you sell and get your money. All right? So, a national symbol. The conch shell also provided food for our tourists and trade for our ancestors. This conch shell was also used by our fishermen. These days, we all have our cell phones and we all get a text, yes, there's some fresh fish downtown or somewhere, or someone selling fish. But back in the day, they would use this conch shell to announce when there was some fresh fish available. So, it's a Saturday morning, and they just come back from fishing, and you would hear this. Fish, fresh fish for sale! Lobster and conch! We even got some shark! Whatever. They would announce the fact that, so when you heard that, that will pass down from house to house, and you know it was time to get your fresh fish. So you see, this conch shell is not just a conch shell. There's so much to this. This conch shell, if you go to Grand Turks, Salt Cay, and South Caicos, we love our gates. And we decorate our gates with our conch shell. We decorate our wall. You should see my house down on West Road right now. Every single inch got a conch shell on it. I know I can't sit there. My mom put it there. I don't know what she put it there for. In any case, we use the conch shell for decorations. This conch shell was also used by men. This is a wonderful story, that when a time of a hurricane or storm traveling, somebody in the village would blow, or the settlement would blow a long single tone. The sound will carry on the wind or the ocean, and then they'll hear it down the next settlement, and so on. And then they would know that a hurricane or a storm is traveling. These days, Weather Channel, Facebook tell you all information. But back in the day, they blow a long single tone. So when you hear this, get your house and your yard ready. Category 5 hurricane coming your way. Irma all the way. Once you heard that sound, you know it was time. So it's a wonderful story. And there are so many other. There were also, I was told, there were different conch shell blows for when someone died, when something was born, somebody was born, all these things, and I would have loved to have found out more. However, we're talking about the conch shell right now as it is. And this conch shell was communication. Now, when I grew up in Grand Turk, the first time I saw TV, I was 10 years old. And my grandfather, his name was Julius Baker, he was the first indigenous or the first belonger, the first islander to hold the title of Chief of Police, or back then, Inspector of Police. Inspector Baker. He was the first local inspector of police. But my grandfather had a passion for fishing. Of course, he liked to fish and catch them, but he hated to clean them. It was my grandmother's job. And she didn't mind because she's from Larimer's. Boy, she can scale that fish and cut that fish in a flash. So my grandparents had their communication. Our next door neighbor, Mr. Louis, also had his own shell. Now, today, all of our children have a cell phone. We all have cell phone. That's how we communicated. But before those days, ladies and gentlemen, welcome and listen to the shell phone. The shell phone, no top-ups, no recharging, unfortunately, no apps. You can't leave a message, but you can communicate. So, if you have a shell phone, you must have a what? A shell phone number. Area code 649, of course. Our shell phone number in my household was too short, one long times 3. Too short, one long times 3. So whatever my grandmother is doing in the backyard and my grandpa come back from fishing, and if you look around, folks, if you look around, look at all the amount of hotels on beachfront property. You know why? Because we had no idea about real estate market. We built indoor, inside the land, yeah, for security. Had my grandparents known about real estate market on beachfront, man, I'll be living right here at beaches right now. In any case, they didn't know about that. They were secure. They lived inland. We lived near the pond on West Road. So when Grandpa come back, and he wants to call my grandpa was a big man. He didn't want to walk too far, so he would use their handy shell phone. Too short, one long times 3. So here it is now. It's Grandma in the backyard with me doing something, and Grandpa comes back and he calls her on their handy shell phone. Oh, that's Julius. Come on, David, let's go down and help your grandpa. So you see, this conch shell is so much more than what you see it is. These days, it's now being sold to our tourists as a souvenir. Mr. Henfield is cutting the shells to make all kind of things, bowls and glasses, and it's a wonderful thing. So the next time you see a conch shell, you have to give respect. So come on, give a round of applause for our beautiful TCI conch shell. All right, now, going back in my grip for one more thing, or a few more things. We are zoned as the Caribbean, and that has good and bad things for us. Unfortunately, you'll find many tourists who will view a Caribbean, say, an ad on TV, a commercial, and they'll see these wonderful mountains and rivers, and they'll see all kind of steel pan music, and a guy with dreadlocks on a raft going, yeah man, come back to Jamaica, and they hear the reggae music, and they assume that we're all the same. No, we are individual countries, and we have individual cultures. Yes, we share many things in common, but our culture gives us our identity and our national pride. And we are very proud. Now, for those who are coming from other Caribbean islands, you might not see the culture in your face as you would in your country. But trust me, right here, we hold that very dear to us. Unfortunately, many people come here and they only want to hear steel pan music or reggae music or soca. But we have our own traditional music called ripsaw music, also known as rake and scrape. Now, rake and scrape, I'll tell the story. Are there any Bahamians here? Oh, good. You see, the Bahamians teeth are rake and scrape, you see? They didn't steal, they teeth it. But I'll let you know what happened. I spent 14 years as the director of culture for the country. And during my time, the first thing I wanted to do was to identify what is unique to Turks and Caicos away from the other Caribbean islands, to find out what identity is. Who are we? And I found out that in the Bahamas, where I grew up, I went to high school, went to school there. My last name is Bowen. My stepfather's name was Henry Bowen. But my people come from Laramus and from Grand Turk and Salt Key. So in any case, in the Bahamas, I realized that the majority of the top musicians who were playing not only ripsaw music, but also gospel, they were not Bahamians by birth. They were from Turks and Caicos Islanders. And so I started to explore who the Bahamians were calling Bahamians. And I can tell you, I was part of the whole conspiracy. In 1977, the Bahamians had the first all-native show. I'm not talking about limbo dancing, I'm talking about Las Vegas type dancing. And I was a dancer in that show. They had 3 gentlemen. My name is David Bowen, along with Kermit Mullings and Matson Delancey. And all this time, for years and years and years, we were the 3 top Bahamian dancers. Come to find out, Matson is from the Bight, and Kermit is from South Caicos. So the top Bahamian dancers, male dancers, were not from the Bahamas. They were from Turks and Caicos Islands. So when I started to explore more, and I found out that, ooh, Blind Blake? Bahamian? No. Turks and Caicos Islanders. Yes. Oh, Marvin Henfield. Marvin Henfield in the Bahamas was known as the Frank Sinatra of the Bahamas. North Caicos. Even KB Ma and Pa, and the list goes on. Even the top gospel band in the Bahamas, every last one of them was from Tux Island. So, after my weaving through all of this, I realized that what they call rake and scrape is really ripsaw music. And what happened was in the 70s, the late 70s, Charles Carter, who's a very popular DJ host on radio, he was describing what the men were doing in Cat Island. They were raking and scraping a carpenter's saw. And so he said they were raking and scraping, and that's when the name came along. In the 70s, before that, it was known as ripsaw music. And that's why if you saw Bahamian or the government of Bahamas website, anytime before 2010, it would say, rake and scrape, a traditional Bahamian experience. Now it says, rake and scrape comes from ripsaw music of where? The Turks and Caicos Islands. Yes. So we should own that. We have to own that. So what is ripsaw? Very simple. It's all in my grip. Now, this is what the main instrument is. Yes, it's a saw. And why do we have a saw? Well, it goes back to Africa. Everything eventually goes back to Africa. So I'll put this down for a second. This is a gourd found in Africa. At one time, it had a vegetable inside. It was eaten. It dried like a coconut shell. And then they made some ridges. And this is a very popular sound in Latin music, which, by the way, comes from rhythms of Africa. So, of course, we have the slave trade, and the slaves go to the Americas and the Caribbean. And because only 10% of the slaves who left Africa went to America, 90% went to the Caribbean. And that's why we are here. You see, when they went down there, they couldn't find this gourd, so they had to improvise. Your greeter, or your greedo, yeah, same thing. Now that's very harsh, so opposed to having something like this, they use something like this. Remember those afros back in the day? Yeah. All right. Then, oh, there's more. There's lots more. The washboard. It has what? Ridges. In New Orleans, they actually make ones that they can wear as a shirt, and they play with thimbles. So you see the technique of the ridges has passed on from Africa right down to us. And the saw has what? Ridges. But you see, we don't use a saw like that because the saw is pliable. Therefore, we can alter the sounds. High notes, low notes. Or by hitting it overtones. Who knew? Who knew? And that is the key to rip-saw music, also known as rake and scrape. Yes. This is known for some as maracas. For us, it's a shaker. You shake it. Now, the maracas, or the shaker, and the saw, they are normally next to each other because they have the same kind of sound, and they reinforce each other. And today's music, if you sit down and listen to a drummer, the technique or the rhythm he's playing on his hi-hat is actually the rhythm of the saw or the shaker. And that's why sometimes you'll hear the guy saying rake and scrape or rip saw, and there's no saw in sight because the guy is on the hi-hat doing it. Yes? These are called knock-knocks. Knock-knocks are anything that you knock together. It could be a glass bottle, anything. And the knock-knock normally goes to someone in the band who's very enthusiastic but got no talent. Because you can't go wrong with knock-knocks, right? You can't go wrong. And I think in your band, probably you play knock-knocks, right? Then we have this. It's a tambourine, but for us, it's also something called a rim. Our drums were not called drums, they were called rims. Now, this rim has two functions because it is goat skin, and it's played like this. Now, you see, you got to be careful with this now, you see, because this can be on a Saturday night, or it can be some party music. But you see, the next day, Jesus. So this particular instrument has a double duty. Talk about the devil and, all right, the devil is a liar. So we call our drums rims. Now, everything so far has been percussive. I was hitting and striking. What happens to the melody? We had the guitar we call the box guitar, yes, a box and some nylon strings, boom, guitar. But we had two very important instruments that I want to showcase. This, what you know as an accordion, we know it as the free-from. Free-from, also known as a concertina, depending on the size and the shape. But you see, back in the day, when our ancestors saw this, they had no idea of its name, the accordion, right? So you hear this sound. Free-from, free-from. Because we were very practical people, yes? If you live behind glass shack, where you live? Behind glass shack. As simple as that, yeah? So, you see, this provided the melody for the folk songs. And the folk songs were really, if you look and listen to some of the folk songs, they tell the history. We didn't write much down, but in the song, if somebody fall down, then they write a song about somebody fall down, or donkey cart, or donkey dead, or whatever have you, yes? So we had the accordion and my favorite instrument of all. Is important to me because when I was 3 years old, my grandfather gave me one, and I've been playing it ever since. And it wasn't called harmonica, it was called simply music. He said, David, play the music, boy, play the music, play the music. And basically, this harmonica has only two sounds because you exhale and you inhale. So once you got that, you're good to go. Now the key, though, is to be able to find the individual notes. That's the hard part, to get this. Then what you do, you add, thank you. Then you add some more notes, and I'll sing another song for you. go crazy now. And so you see, once you had this, along with the free fra and the knock-knocks and everything else, what you got is rip-saw music. All right? Now, the problem is, we couldn't always find this, and we couldn't always find the free fra. So, all you gotta do is go in your grandma or your wife's bedroom and find the comb, yes? Like you tell her hair was hard hair. I'm sorry, I digressed. So, how do you play the comb? Simply, get some paper. And all you have to do is hum the song you want. Your lips will vibrate and you get. And boy, listen, my grandfather, he would sit there sometimes as a little boy and just do this. And I'd be laughing and rolling the floor with how he sounded. So you see, it's a very simple culture, but a very profound culture, rich in history and heritage. Thank you. So now you know exactly who we are and why we are. And I have 3 students, please come up. 3 students who've been working very hard. And again, going back to the fact that we are sometimes looked upon by the other Caribbean islands or by tourists who come here as having so much more than what they see on TV. So we had this poem, and actually because of the timing, and I must say, you guys are running on time, so it was amazing, wonderful. So unfortunately, they couldn't get here in time to actually open the show, so they will end. So it's been a pleasure, thank you, and please enjoy this wonderful poem called The Turks and Caicos Islands. Okay. Can I get my stuff off the, yeah, just 1 second. Pack my grip.
Mics are on? Yeah. Your mic is on? Press the button.
The Turks and Caicos Islands. Who are we, you might ask? Well, we'll tell you. We have
no forest of tall trees, no high mountain tops, no rivers or waterfalls, no acres of crops, no yellow banana,
no
sweet sugar cane. It's not much you might say, but let us explain.
Our country is small of a limestone base. The soil is quite thin and commonplace. Some islands do grow an abundance of crops, but never enough for shelves in the shops.
We're not lucky, like some of our Caribbean friends, with rich fertile soils and rich fertile lands of mangoes and plantains, breadfruit and yam, cows for beef and pigs for ham.
The lay of our land lies flat and low, and over our heads a tropic breeze blows. The view from above is a beautiful sight, an ocean of turquoise and sand powder white. No forest of tall trees, no high mountain tops, no rivers, no rainfalls, no acres of crops, no yellow banana, no sweet sugar cane.
It's not
Much we know, but we'll further explain.
Surrounding our shores are beautiful reefs, crystal blue waters where divers dive deep. At the right time of year, you'll see humpback whales. On these blue-green waters, our sloops set their sails.
Cotton, sponge, sisal, and fish, dry conch, salt, whale oil, and crawfish. All of these things we had to trade in the past. As fate would have it, these trades did not last.
Our import is high, our export is low. It's tourism that now makes our economy grow. This is the key to the future we hold. We're small, this we know. but we stand big and
Big and
bold.
No
No forest of tall trees, no high mountain tops, no rivers or waterfalls, no acres of crops, no yellow banana, no sweet sugar cane.
But we hope you are listening to what we explain. These strings of pearls in this turquoise sea, from the largest of landmass to the smallest of key, is our small piece of heaven, our own paradise of fresh conch and lobster, steamed fish and rice.
It's moments like these when we all understand
The strength of our nation and the wealth of our land.
Beautiful by nature, clean by choice,
And we'll sing of our blessings
in one unified voice.
Who are we, you might ask?
We are
The Turks and Caicos Islands.
And we bid you
welcome.
Thank you. I now invite you to stand as we welcome Honorable Charlene Cartwright Robinson, our Premier, to bring remarks.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. I'm glad all the entertainment has gone before, so you expect none from me. You may be seated. Today I am indeed honored to stand here on this historic occasion to greet each of you in your respective places and in support of critical work for this noble institution. Whilst this is only the 4th annual meeting of gatherings in this type forum, I commend this body, for its formation, the great strides being made across the region, and then I wish to assure you of my support and my government's support. I must congratulate our very own director of TCI's Integrity Commission, Mr. Eugene Otonye, on his election as chair, and on our hosting this year's gathering. Along with the reputation and work of our own Integrity Commission, the high compliance rates for filings for persons in public office, this statement of hosting this conference in our country sends the best message at the right time. One that says we welcome standards, we support standards, and we will enforce standards for the good of our country. We have in our short time been able to establish ourselves as leaders in this critical work of ensuring integrity in public life and have been an example for others to follow, and in fact are doing just that. We are proud of this body of work, and we want the region and the world to know that we are taking a stance to ensure that we enjoy and practice the highest practices of integrity in public life, and that corruption indeed fizzles. Whilst our work in this area is recognized, and whilst regional governments continue to see the important work, much is left to be done locally and regionally in terms of education. The conference theme, Counting the Real Cost of Corruption, Engaging Everyone in the Fight, though inspirational, is our greatest challenge, one that requires our greatest effort, otherwise the goal or objectives of our agencies or this regional body will not be realized. It requires the connecting of dots that shows how it affects you as a country and even you as an individual. It requires individual, civic organization, notably the church, local governmental, regional, and global partners. My government has already demonstrated in a tangible way our support in the fight against corruption through the passage of the bribery ordinance very early in our administration. We have accepted that corruption costs more than we can afford or are willing to pay. We have accepted and believe that the government is critical in this fight and must lead the way. We have seen our corruption cost financially. We have seen how corruption costs financially, as well as reputationally. And as guardians and stewards of our country's name and resources, we are resolute in our stance. It is important that we educate even the smallest child on the importance of integrity, and make connections in the simplest form as to how it adversely affects systems, governments, and countries. We recognize that because of corruption, we can be made to pay more than value for goods and services, thereby robbing critical areas of much-needed resources. It, of course, can attract unsavory characters while discouraging the entry of good, wholesome investors. It can cost us a loss of critical experience and manpower when persons are recruited corruptly. And certainly it can cost us in reputation all around. These are but a few, but hard corrections and connections that must be made. When this message is captured in a package for all audiences, then and only then will we be able to celebrate the achievement of this theme. And we must note that this is a continuous goal to be reached. I note your distinguished panel of presenters and know that you will have a productive few days. It is my hope that literature will continue to be forthcoming and that awareness campaigns will only increase. I welcome those of you who have traveled to this conference to our beautiful country, and I wish for you a wonderful experience among one time internationally acclaimed best island, but certainly the recipient of multiple awards for world's best speech. Congratulations, you are indeed on a piece of that exclusive pie. I especially welcome my former lecturer, Dr. Trevor Monroe. I am one of many thousands of students who passed through his hands, and as young as he looked, and as young as I am one of his students out of the class of 1996, having been taught under him in 1993. And I can say that I am certainly better, and sometimes a little bit more radical for it. I say to you as I close, be steadfast in your work, and do not stop what you are doing. You are doing a great work, and these islands of the sea will certainly be better for it. Thank you, and God bless you.
This Mercy Lugo, the winner of the TCI Integrity Speak Off 2015-2017, will now come and do an item for us.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Counting the cost of corruption, engaging everyone in the fight. Corruption is very common. It is easy to do, for we see it all through. Corruption is the misuse of entrusted power, and we see it all over. It is easy money, it is easy gain, and it is not far away. Corruption is all over the world, but we must endure and fight against it. We want it to end, yet we don't take a step. A step for what is right, a step to change our land. If we stand together, corruption can be solved. Ladies and gentlemen, the impact of corruption affects us all. Corruption hinders economic growth. Corruption hinders creation of jobs. Corruption leads to poverty. Corruption makes the rich richer. Corruption makes the poor poorer. Corruption leads to unfair practices. So, what is the cause of corruption? Corruption is caused by a lack of accountability, monopoly powers, discretionary powers, unmonitored power of influential people, and a lack of transparency by our people. Let's start to do the right thing. We need to stop receiving or giving money to expedite services. We need to stop bribing and being bribed. We call ourselves men and women of character and integrity, but yet some of us are so easy to be persuaded into expediting services in exchange for a payment. We tend to say that corruption does not have a cure, but it can be cured if we just value education, It can be cured if we have an effective and regular vigilance system and all of us act like responsible citizens. Corruption can be cured by promoting strong legislation, strong media support, and strong social organization. Corruption is hard on all of us. We have to pay a cost that is not only money, but our time as well, our peace, and even our sleep sometimes. Because if we don't pay, nothing gets moving. Because if we don't pay, we end up losing. We as people just need to talk to the authorities and say what's going on. Speak to the authorities and seek a change. Speak to the authorities and therefore make a change. A change that will begin by each and every one of you individual step. Ladies and gentlemen, let us engage our children, our schools, our churches, our government institutions. Ladies and gentlemen, let's include us all in the fight against corruption. But the only way we fight against corruption is to educate us all. Education is the most powerful weapon which can be used to change this world. Let us use this weapon to not only change our beautiful by nature Turks and Caicos, but also change the Caribbean and all around the world. Let us all fight together as one people, one fight. Thank you.
It's that time now for the feature address. And the young gentleman who will deliver this address is the Executive Director of National Integrity Action, Jamaica's chapter of Transparency International since 2012. And he has been appointed as an individual member of Transparency International, one of only 30 globally and the only such from the Caribbean. He has a distinguished record as an academic in civil society, advocacy, and in public service. As an academic, he has authored or co-authored 9 books on Caribbean democratic governance and received many awards. These include the Vice Chancellor's Award for Excellence, the Mona Principal's Award for Research, 2 Fulbright Fellowships taken up at Harvard University in the United States, and an honorary doctorate in social sciences from Florida International University, the first person from the English-speaking Caribbean to receive such an award. After gaining a first-class honors degree and a master's in government from UWI, Dr. Monroe was awarded the Jamaican Rhodes Scholarship and attained his PhD in political science from Oxford University. In September 2013, Professor Monroe was the only person from the Caribbean invited to speak at the 110th anniversary of the Rhodes Scholarship, celebrated at Oxford University. As a civil society advocate, Professor Monroe was instrumental as founder and co-founder of Citizens Action for Free and Fair Elections, University and Allied Workers Union, and the award-winning Radio Current Development Programs. He has delivered keynote presentations in the Bahamas, Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, among other CARICOM states. In the sphere of public service, he, on the nomination of then Prime Minister P.J. Patterson, served in the Jamaican Senate for 10 years, championing legislation for greater transparency, accountability, and good governance. He also served on the executive of the Confederation of Trade Unions and the private sector's think tank in the 1990s. He has served as a consultant to USAID, UK DFID, the UNDP, UNESCO, the OAS, the Carter Center, and many other international bodies. He is currently a member of the Partnership for Prosperous Jamaica, previously called the Council of Partnership for Jamaica, now chaired by the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, and previously chaired by former Prime Minister Portia Simpson Miller. Previously, he served on Jamaica's National Security Council on the invitation of then Prime Minister Golding. In Jamaica's 2015 National Honors, Professor Monroe was awarded the Order of Distinction Commander Class. He's married to Ingrid, President and CEO of Excel Insurance Brokers, of which he's also the chairman. His two children, Tarek and Kinshasha, each hold master's degrees in human resource development. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand as we welcome Professor Trevor Monroe, who will present on our theme, Counting the Real Cause of Corruption, Engaging Everyone in the Fight.
Chairperson, Reverend Julia Williams, may I thank you for observing all protocols on my behalf and on behalf of other persons who have spoken this afternoon. And may I thank dear Dismercy for delivering my 50-minute feature address in 5 minutes. Thank you very much. I must say I feel also very, very inadequate without my grip from Jamaica, and I could never imagine, as Roger was saying to me, that there's so much in that grip. Thank you, oh dear brother David, for that extraordinary account of Turks and Caicos' culture. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, delegates from our Caribbean territories, students, allow me to thank Madam Chairperson for her kind words of introduction. At the same time, I wish to express my most sincere appreciation for the invitation from Eugene, my friend, and the organizing committee to deliver the feature address at this very important conference. You have asked me to share my thoughts with you on the theme, Counting the Real Cost of Corruption, Engaging Everyone in the Fight. Clearly, two significant items arising from your discussions in Jamaica on, and here I quote the theme at that time, the anti-corruption agenda, today, tomorrow, the region and beyond. And the theme of that third annual conference in Jamaica arose from the overall focus at the second annual in Trinidad and Tobago, and that is the role of integrity commissions and anti-corruption bodies in transforming the Commonwealth Caribbean. With a little bit of reflection, you can immediately see that the successive conference themes have been drilling down from the most general to the more specific. And this afternoon and today earlier on, and for the next few days, you are enjoined to become more specific, to count the cost of the abuse of power, the abuse of position for illicit gain, costs in terms of the trust in governance, cost in terms of dollars and cents, cost to the man in the street, cost to all of our societies. Additionally, the background note to this theme asks us as conference participants to reflect on how effective or otherwise have been our integrity commissions and anti-corruption bodies. Are you really succeeding? Are you failing? We're asked to consider. And I can tell you right off, my conclusion is that you are succeeding, but there is obviously much more to be done. You're being asked further to consider how involved or otherwise are our people in the ongoing fight against corruption and how we may better engage them in that fight. Are they apathetic or are they not? And I can tell you right off, my answer is that they are not apathetic, though there is much to be done in increasing the level of their involvement and of their engagement. May I therefore congratulate the conference organizers for this most appropriate choice of theme, as it were getting down now to the nuts and bolts of the consequences of corruption and to the means of engaging our people in strengthening the combat of this evil. Indeed, it was just a short while ago that the Commonwealth Secretary General, the Right Honourable Patricia Scotland, who favoured us with virtual remarks earlier, warned of a global tsunami of corruption. And you and I and all of us here know how vulnerable small island developing states are to tsunamis of whatever kind. Our Secretary General went on to say that the extent of this malady demands a coordinated international response. This conference forms part of that coordinated response, and we wish to convey our gratitude, all of the delegates here, the gratitude to the Commonwealth Secretariat through our dear friend Roger for their critical role in sponsoring this conference and the preceding three of integrity commissions and anti-corruption bodies of the Commonwealth Caribbean. The Commonwealth Secretariat is clearly putting its money where its mouth is, and we invite so many other international partners to do likewise, as we congratulate the Secretariat. As we do so, it is worth recognizing that corruption, its costs, and the associated imperative of combating it has attracted more consensus at the international level, at the regional level, at the national level, at the level of the man in the street, than perhaps any other issue of our times. And by virtue of that consensus, there is perhaps no other issue in our time which requires a more rapid closing of the gap between aspiration and achievement, between lofty words and lagging deeds. The 2005 United Nations Convention Against Corruption, UNCAC, was and remains one of the earliest and most important expressions of this consensus among nations. To this convention, all our Caribbean states have signaled their agreement, and hence their endorsement of the words in the foreword to that convention of then Secretary General Kofi A. Annan, when he said, "Corruption is an insidious plague that has a wide range of corrosive effects." As was earlier said by Eugene, Kofi Annan reminded us it undermines democracy and the rule of law, leads to violation of human rights, distorts markets, erodes the quality of life, and allows organized crime, terrorism, and other threats to human security to flourish. Significantly, the then Secretary General remarked that this evil phenomenon is found in all countries. Let no one believe that this is a Caribbean phenomenon. In all countries, big and small, rich and poor, but it is in the developing world that its effects are most destructive. Hurts the poor disproportionately by diverting funds intended for development, undermining a government's ability to provide basic necessities, feeding inequality and injustice, and discouraging foreign aid and investment, a major obstacle to poverty alleviation and development. As such, ladies and gentlemen, Article 13 of the UNCAC, this convention, obliges signatory states, and here I quote, to promote active participation of individuals and of groups outside of the public sector, encouraging us to engage the society, all the people, in the combat of corruption. Here in the UNCAC, we have a clear recognition of the fact that the costs of corruption are not only economic, they are not only political, they're also social and moral. And also, the more the people are engaged in that combat, is the more successful we shall be. So much so that in the few years after the convention was signed and came into force, the nations of the world once again met in 2015, once more assembled to discuss the goals which needed to be accomplished if sustainable development was to be achieved. Not surprisingly, there was agreement once again on consensus that one such goal had to be combat of corruption. Goal number 16, which states that there can be no sustainable development, whether in rich or poor countries, in big or small, without more effective combat of bribery and corruption in all its forms. Clearly, that combat remains far from as effective as it needs to be, because each year, as Eugene and as Roger reminded us, between $1.5 to $2 trillion is lost from the economy in bribes. And of course, many of those bribes are paid right here in our Caribbean to public officials. Another $3 trillion is lost to the global economy from tax evasion. And there are many tax evaders in our various territories. And 2/3 of the world's states are viewed as highly corrupt on the Corruption Perception Index. No wonder, distinguished guests, the president of the World Bank described corruption in December of 2013 as public enemy number 1. The World Bank Institute tells us that countries that improve on the control of corruption and rule of law can expect, in the long run, a 4-fold increase in per capita income. And further, that the difference between 2 to 4% per annum in the country's income growth rates between countries with a different extent of corruption control. 2 to 4% per annum. And if you think that's small, bear in mind that the annual rate of economic growth of the CARICOM region since 2009 has been 0.8 since 2009. What about the cost in terms of governance? The Global Corruption Barometer of 2013 provides results of a survey conducted in 107 countries, including Jamaica, and interviewing in those countries 114,000 people. That survey found that 54% of the people in those countries on average believe that government has been captured, has been taken over by private interests and do not serve the public interest. 65% believe that in the United States, and we're talking about 2013, we're not talking about now. 60% in the United Kingdom, 73% in Israel. Only in Northwestern Europe did a majority believe that government was serving the public interest. As significantly, and please note this, in 51 of those 107 countries, including Canada, the United Kingdom, the United States, and in Africa, Nigeria and Senegal, in Asia, India, Japan, and South Korea, in Latin America, and the Caribbean, Uruguay, and Jamaica, of those 51 countries, persons believed that the most corrupt of 12 institutions surveyed was the political party. Coming to our region, The studies that have been done measuring the actual economic cost of corruption are not many, and they need to be more, and we need to encourage our universities to delve more deeply into the actual cost of corruption. But those that have been done, one such by Professor Michael Collier out of the Florida International University, he undertook an econometric study of 9 Caribbean states. And he found that the most significant effect of corruption on Caribbean development are in total economic output, in gross domestic product, in capital formation, and in the rule of law. For example, Collier assessed that a 1-unit improvement in political corruption in Jamaica would bring it up to a corruption level slightly better than the Bahamas, and that with this corruption improvement would come an 84% increase in gross national product, a $1.7 billion increase in capital formation, a $286.4 million increase in foreign direct investment. Collier continued that economic improvements of this magnitude, even if over a 5 to 10 year period, would be considered economic miracles in most Caribbean states. With this burden of corruption on the backs of our societies and of our people, human development in the Caribbean is in relative decline compared to other parts of the world. Between 2010 and 2015, according to the UNDP's Human Development Report, all 12 Caribbean states measured, with the sole exception of Barbados and St. Kitts, including the Bahamas, Antigua, Barbuda, Trinidad and Tobago, Grenada, St. Lucia, Jamaica, Dominica, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines, Belize and Guyana. Each of those 10 slipped in rank in the Human Development Index vis-a-vis the other 188 states that were measured. And the highest ranking amongst all CARICOM countries was Barbados at number 54. This means that no Caribbean state was in the top 25% of those globally ranked. Across the region as well, the corruption levels seriously impact our people's confidence and our people's trust in governance. In 7 Caribbean states recently, a study was done under the auspices of the UNDP by my colleague, Professor Anthony Harriott. And in those 7 states, a majority of people believed that the politically well-connected, the rich and well-off, can rarely be convicted for serious offenses in our justice system. This clearly suggests that the impunity of the powerful and the well-connected contributes to cynicism amongst our people, and that conversely, catching, prosecuting successfully, and jailing the big fish would go a far way to engaging our people more effectively in the fight against corruption. May I therefore suggest that successful investigation, prosecution, and incarceration of the corrupt in high society is an indispensable ingredient of getting more people involved in the fight against corruption. Indeed, surveys reveal, certainly in Jamaica, that many people don't get involved because they believe and their experience suggests that nothing will happen if they make a report. And therefore, the risk of being victimized as a result of reporting is not worth taking. Global best practice tends to confirm the simple equation, the virtuous circle. More prosecution of the powerful leads to more people involvement, and more people involvement encourages more successful prosecution. Take the case of Indonesia, very large country, improving every year in the Corruption Perception Index recently. And the example of the Indonesian Corruption Eradication Commission, the KPK, modeled on the Hong Kong Independent Commission Against Corruption, about which we may say a little more later. In the first place, the KPK combines powers of investigation and prosecution. And in its first 5 years, the agency unprecedentedly and successfully prosecuted over 100 senior officials and never lost a single case involving persons who by their positions and prominence would have been considered untouchable. These 100 included members of parliament, at least one minister, mayors, ambassadors. Also, significantly, the KPK prosecuted and jailed directors of private companies involved in corrupt transactions with public officials. As a result, as our chairperson pointed out, the KPK enjoyed the highest level of public support amongst all government agencies. And when the inevitable, unavoidable pushback came from the powerful, from the high and the mighty, it is the people, civil society, the man in the street, the grassroots, who came out in defense of that Integrity Commission and anti-corruption body. That is how and why the people got involved, because they saw that this was for them. And those who regarded themselves as untouchable were indeed touchable once they broke the law on the principle of equality before the law. Of course, in our region, at the national level, in the country I know best, Jamaica, the national security policy laid in Parliament in 2014 identifies, their words, not mine, elected and public officials, corruption of elected and public officials, and in state institutions, money laundering and financial crime, as the #1 clear and present danger facing Jamaica's national security and economic development. That policy document goes on to say that because of the twin evils of crime and corruption as its facilitator, Jamaica's economy is 3 to 10 times smaller than it could have been. Imagine a small man, average per capita income in Jamaica of $5,000. That could be 15 to 50,000, were there a better handle on crime and corruption. In the case of political corruption, that is the use and distribution of public goods and scarce resources in a partisan manner to build and consolidate political support at great cost. Jamaica has evolved that aberration of democracy called the political garrison. Zones of exclusion in which there is little or no political competition, and in which violence and intimidation and the handing out of scarce goods, housing and otherwise, is used to consolidate support to defend political monopoly. Indeed, in the most notorious case of this phenomenon, the Commission of Inquiry, chaired by our friend Sir David, into the West Kingston operation in 2010 to apprehend the self-confessed criminal, Don, and enforcer, now serving time in the United States, concluded in part as follows, and here I quote, "We believe that such fortification of a residential community in a Commonwealth Caribbean state was unprecedented in the history of the region." Commission goes on to find approximately 300 gunmen from across Jamaica were mobilized with a view to preventing the arrest of coke, and in the community itself, in excess of 50 armed men in the community. Here we see the most extreme example of a state within a state arising from political corruption. But of course, there are many degrees of political corruption. That is the most extreme example. In the course of confronting this aberration, cost the Jamaican people in lives, hundreds of millions of dollars, and an international reputation severely spoilt and contaminated. One other example reflecting the real cost of corruption, the impact of the Ponzi schemes, the illegal, irregular financial schemes, which afflicted many states in the Caribbean, Antigua and Jamaica perhaps the most well-known, but none so significantly as in Jamaica, the amounts invested and lost to the Jamaican economy and to approximately 50,000 investors and their accounts through David Smith's Olent. And you know David Smith. Cash Plus, Worldwise, and other Ponzi scheme is estimated by a 2009 International Monetary Fund working paper at 1 to 2 billion US dollars. That is 12 to 25% of GDP. The highest percentage lost to GDP, except for Albania, of the 11 countries surveyed in the IMF paper. Clearly, against this background, every single Caribbean citizen, save the corrupt minority, every single Caribbean citizen, every unemployed and underemployed Caribbean person, particularly our youth or every underpaid self-employed person, all who justifiably complain that their income does not allow them to make two ends meet, each have an interest in reducing and ultimately eliminating the real cost of corruption, and thereby significantly improving the conditions of our people. In this context, it is not surprising, is it, ladies and gentlemen, that every single aspiring political leader, himself or herself, presents themselves as an anti-corruption champion, promising in a variety of ways to deal more effectively with the scourge than the opposing side. A few illustrations may suffice rather. The Barbados Labour Party, which recently registered a convincing victory in that country's elections, committed itself in its manifesto to lay on the table of Parliament the draft of its Integrity Commission bill, a draft, by the way, which quite commendably is actually included in the manifesto, committed itself to lay that Integrity Commission bill at the very first sitting following the election of the new House of Representatives. Similarly, 2.5 years ago, in its 2016 manifesto, the Jamaica Labour Party government, now as it is, acknowledged, and here I quote, "Corruption impedes economic growth, undermines the rule of law, and tears the fabric of society," end of quotes. On that basis, the manifesto committed to, quote, "strengthening corruption prevention authorities and tougher penalties for dealing with integrity in the public office," end of quotes. In his budget presentation in March 2017, Prime Minister Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica, declared, and here I quote, "The corruption that allows illegal guns and ammunition to come through our ports must be stopped. The corruption that denies the grant of a permit in order to secure payment must be stopped. This government," Prime Minister continued, "is serious about ensuring the highest standards of probity and of accountability," end of quotes. A few days after that, the leader of the opposition in Jamaica declared, here I quote, too many areas of our national lives, including our politics, have been scarred by corruption. In Trinidad and Tobago, in reflecting on its second year in office, the government of Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley admitted that the major challenge facing his government is the extent of corruption in Trinidad and Tobago. And so the promises and the commitments of political leadership continue to resonate across our region, I suggest, not because of our people's apathy, but because each recognize that the people's concern to deal with corruption compels those who would seek their support to promise that they will deal with it more effectively. May I suggest that your integrity commissions and anti-corruption bodies need to help ensure that these words are translated into deeds, that these promises lead to action, and more importantly, you need to help our people hold our governments to account. Not that there's no accountability. From time to time, though too rarely, persons of high status, including ministers of government, when faced with credible allegations of corruption, find themselves having to resign. As recently, most recently in Antigua, Barbuda, Minister of Investment and Trade, on May 17th, could hardly not resign when confronted with tapes of his voice with the briber in the United Kingdom. Much earlier on, 2010 in Jamaica, Minister of State Hibbert, as he was then, had to resign, again, credible allegations. Or in this very country, Turks and Caicos, former premier and ministers are now before the courts to answer charges in relation to allegations of corruption. Indeed, the establishment of many of our integrity commissions and anti-corruption bodies over the last few decades in our region represents some effort, not just to satisfy international commitments, but also to mollify the real concerns amongst our electorates. In respect of both constituencies, however, the international and the national, these efforts more often than not fall short in achieving their intended or purported effect. Nationally, surveys of public opinion inevitably indicate the majority of the people being dissatisfied with efforts to tackle corruption. Sometimes this produces an erosion of confidence in democracy itself, and it produces an inclination to turn to unacceptably authoritarian methods to deal with this continuing scourge. The Latin American Public Opinion Project, LAPUP, carried out every 2 years, in its most recent report in 2017, found that there was a general decline in support for democracy across the 20-odd countries surveyed in Latin America and the Caribbean. And most disturbingly, in Jamaica, there was the lowest confidence in elections across the hemisphere and the highest support for military takeover as a means of dealing with the extraordinary level of perceived levels of corruption and its consequence, violent crime. This, of course, needless to say, in companies such as this, would be highly undesirable, like our people jumping from the frying pan into the fire. But it reveals the level of frustration and concern that some way must be found to deal with this crime and this corruption. Just listening to the news earlier on today, coming out of Jamaica on Saturday. 6 people in one day, shot and killed in different parts of the country. Where do these guns come from? Illegal weapons brought in through ports of entry, largely, manned by public officials, turning a blind eye very often, in return for illicit gains. But what is this telling us about the extent to which our people are involved in the fight against corruption? And what is it telling us about the relative effectiveness of the institutions which we represent? In the first place, there can be little doubt that large sections of our population are concerned about the need to reduce corruption. One symptom of this, I've mentioned, is that those who aspire to get the people's vote will invariably include in that reasons for requesting the request their stance against corruption. There has perhaps not been an election in the Caribbean over the last many decades in which the aspirant for the people's support did not promise to deal with corruption and to indict the opposing party for being a facilitator of corruption. This would certainly be an anomaly, would it not, if the population was indifferent to corruption. Indeed, I recall 10 years ago authoring a study for the Organization of American States to support the need for campaign finance regulations and for political party registration, looking at all the countries across the region, and there was not one where there was not an election-related corruption scandal. The intensity of public controversy around these scandals and their impact on the electorate's choice suggests not so much apathy, but involvement, a willingness on the part of the people to use the means most immediately available to them, their votes, as an anti-corruption tool. There's many a Caribbean prime minister or former prime minister, many of whom shall remain nameless. I can think of two in Jamaica who will tell you, if you think the people are apathetic about allegations of corruption, I would still be in my job. But absence of apathy and concern to use the tool, the vote, has meant that former prime ministers have their tenure cut short. The issue then is, how do we convert this wish at election times to punish and to remove from power leaders credibly associated with corruption, either facilitating it or not dealing with it firmly enough? How do we convert that from an electoral phenomenon every 5 years into an ongoing, annual, monthly, weekly, and daily concern? Even with those limited levels of awareness at the cost of corruption in their daily lives, our people have had the inclination, limited as it may be to an election every 5 years, of using the vote in the electoral arena as a weapon against those perceived to be corrupt. In regard to the impact or otherwise of our integrity institutions on the incidence of corruption, whether you are failing or not, I shall have to leave details of that discussion to the country-by-country reports and to the panels which shall form the central part of the proceedings in the days following this opening ceremony. My own view, based in part on surveys done of our integrity commissions and anti-corruption bodies in Jamaica, is that you are not failing, that you are doing much better than passing, but that much more can and should be done. The question is how. Available evidence suggests from global best practice that a critical part of the success of integrity commissions and anti-corruption bodies such as are represented here rests with successful prosecution of untouchables, but also, alongside that, with success in engaging the man in the street, in building citizen awareness, in sustaining public education. Allow me to look briefly at one such example, the case of Hong Kong, the Hong Kong Independent Commission Against Corruption. As many of you know, the Hong Kong ICAC has over the years achieved much success, both in dealing with corruption as well as the perception of it. In 2015, for example, 213 persons in 117 cases were prosecuted, resulting in a person-based conviction rate of 82% and a case-based conviction rate of 84%. Annual opinion surveys, which we might well want to consider as a tool of our commissions in the various Caribbean territories, annual opinion surveys conducted by independent research agencies have consistently shown that about 97% of the respondents in Hong Kong express their support for the ICAC. A critical element of this success lies not just in investigative operations, it lies in the emphasis placed on community relations and the work of the Community Relations Department in building public awareness. This work gives priority to media platforms to spread anti-corruption messages and to publicize the work of the ICAC. These include anti-corruption messages disseminated through television and radio advertisements, posters on the internet, the TV drama series in Hong Kong, ICAC Investigators, has become a household title. The ICAC website provides the public with the latest news of the Commission information on corruption prevention and access to the ICAC audiovisual products and other publications. The ICAC seeks to instill a sense of integrity in the daily lives of youngsters through ICAC knowledge, online games, animation, and comics in the youth website, IT in Camp. The ICAC smartphone app is a one-stop shop for education and information and features to access the latest news of activities of the ICAC and a convenient channel for watching integrity videos. Overall, this community engagement and the department responsible for that engages in such public awareness building and education that ICAC is more or less a household name. Of course, all of this takes financial and human resources far beyond the means available to any of our commissions or our anti-corruption bodies. But the point I'm wishing to make and to stress is that a significant percentage of ICAC's budget, approximately 16–17%, is devoted to community relations. I suggest that however limited our resources, however limited the resources made available to our Commonwealth Caribbean bodies, a similar percentage has to be devoted to citizen awareness building, to public education on integrity, if we are to succeed in engaging everyone in the fight, at least beyond their periodic election involvement. In fact, we should have no choice in doing this. Article 13 of the UNCAC obligates state parties and institutions such as our own, and here I quote, to raise public awareness regarding the existence, the causes, and the gravity of and the threat posed by corruption. Many of our commissions try to do this, and indeed with limited resources, but do not have the means to implement that recognition. And therefore part of our mission, and not least of all groups in civil society like National Integrity Action, must therefore be to enhance levels of advocacy, to get our governments and our international development partners to provide the resources as one earnest of the sincerity of their commitment in combating corruption and to cut the real cost of that evil to our people, to our governance, to our society, and indeed to the international community itself. I know, for example, that in Jamaica, our Office of the Contractor General seeks to reach out in various ways with almost no resources from the state for that purpose, to go to the schools, to run competitions amongst the youth, to raise the level of understanding of how corruption negatively impacts their lives and why they need to get involved. In relation to non-governmental organizations and civil society bodies, the message is even clearer as to how to engage. And allow me to say a few words about our experience as an NGO in National Integrity Action in our relatively successful program in building public awareness. Over the last few years, we have produced and aired on the electronic media at least 12, 40, 30, 40-second advertisements dealing with subjects like vote buying, tax evasion, campaign finance, garrison constituencies, and law enforcement. One example of the intensity of this engagement, a recent ad under the rubric, "Do the Right Thing," was aired on radio and television, cinema and cable channels over 1,300 times in a 9-month period between July 2017 and March 2018. You can't help but buck it up. You have to turn off your television or don't go to the cinema because you're going to buck it up. Do the right thing with examples of wrongs that need to be combated. That's an average of somewhere in the region of 135 ads per month, or 4 or 5 per day. Along with these ads are 3 full-length documentaries shown on national television, and in the case of the flagship documentary, The Cost of Corruption, Jamaica's Barrier to Prosperity, has been viewed additionally by some 300,000 persons on our website and YouTube channel. In addition to the ads and the documentaries, we published anniversary supplements in the major newspapers reaching tens of thousands of people, and manuals directed specifically at justice sector officials, such as the manual entitled Prosecuting the Corrupt, Best Practices. Of course, face-to-face communication matters very much in our Caribbean. Good to be on television, on radio and all of that, but better to meet the people face-to-face. Hence, in communicating with the youth and the man in the street, we have held over 50 town hall meetings and keynote presentations over the last couple of years in every single parish capital of Jamaica. Quite interestingly, and very much aligned with the experience of ICAC, to which I referred, the ICAC governmental organization in Hong Kong, and I only learned this when preparing my thoughts for this presentation. NIA has spent upwards of 30%, that's 30 cents out of every dollar of our budget, on various forms of community engagement, including not just producing media products, but as well with partnerships with our anti-corruption agencies, civil society organizations, professional, religious, and youth groups. 10,000 Man and Family March in Jamaica now, which is becoming institutionalized, is something that we are involved in every single year in Spanish Town, in Maypen, in Montego Bay, because our churches are now beginning to understand that it's good to preach the message from the pulpit. It's even better to carry it into the streets, into the highways and byways, in the communities. And so, in seeking to engage the broadest cross-section of the population, how has that been working? What has been the impact? In just 4 or 5 years, 47%, or approximately 1.5 million Jamaicans, are aware of NIA's existence and what it stands for. Undoubtedly as well, the intensity of this engagement has contributed to advances in the people's involvement in the fight against corruption. It has contributed to legislation, path-breaking for the Caribbean. I should modify that, by the way. We were ahead of Turks and Caicos in 2008, 2009, but then Turks and Caicos took the lead in establishing party registration and robust campaign finance regulations. We have just recently passed those laws, as well as the establishment of a single anti-corruption commission, one in which there will be prosecutorial powers. It's good to investigate, good to chat, but when it comes to all people, and I don't believe we're any different from anywhere else, put your money where your mouth is. In fact, our previous Contractor General, I don't fully agree with what he said, but I share it with you. Greg Christie said that the office of the Contractor General was like a toothless bulldog. And I had to say to him that a toothless bulldog is better than a poodle with teeth. Because that bulldog so barked so loud, so frequently, that the awareness of the people was indeed grown and enhanced by virtue of that bark. And now the time for the teeth has come, and I am very happy to see our 3 provisional directors of the new Integrity Commission here at this conference, Dirk and David and Yvonne, to share the experience as it unfolds. But this intensity of public awareness building has increased the people's intolerance of bribery. You often hear that is a thing all over the Caribbean. True. But the survey done in 2006 by the Latin American Public Opinion Project, LAPOP, found that 56% of Jamaicans people were willing to tolerate bribery. 2017, that is now down to 26%. Still a far way to go, but cutting it more than half. In 2006 as well, 36% of our people, above the global average of 27%, willing to pay and take a bribe. Admitted self-admission. The same instrument, the same survey, 2017, that's now down to between 10 and 12%. So awareness building and engagement does impact, providing the messages are appropriately configured and repeated with the intensity that it requires to come to grips with the corruption phenomenon. The people themselves are now finding new ways to get involved in the fight against corruption beyond the once every 5 years. Increased numbers are calling into the programs, the call-in programs, a phenomenon across our region, which is why so many of our countries score so highly on the Freedom of Information score. More articles in the print media now against corruption. Between January to March of this year, 2018, in the main newspaper, The Gleaner, over 40 articles dealing with different aspects of corruption, editorials, columnists. And may I say, the partnership with the media workers, potential investigative journalists, is something that we hold close and dear to our heart, and something that I would recommend very, very strongly to our colleagues, civil society organizations, as well as to governmental bodies such as your own. Most importantly, according to both the Global Corruption Barometer of 2013 and the Latin American Public Opinion Project, 77% of Jamaicans state they are now willing to join an anti-corruption organization. Global average was 53%, 77%. And most of them are saying that the ordinary people can make a difference. And 82% of that 47 who know about NIA are giving a positive rating for the work that is being done. And I go into all of this not in any way to blow our own trumpet, but to really try to demonstrate that awareness building does matter. It may not seem, it may look like the seed is falling on rocky ground, but it is not. The people's understanding will grow and their awareness will develop and their ability to confront the corrupt, providing you provide the prosecutorial cover, is the way to go. And not surprisingly to us, therefore, on the Corruption Perception Index in 2017, Jamaica made the biggest advance in score and in rank, still far below where we need to be, since our participation in 2002, and Jamaica was in the top 3 of 180 countries globally in terms of improvement in rank and in score. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, much of this would not have been possible without funding support. It does take cash. And we are very, very thankful in that regard to the United States Agency for International Development, the United Kingdom Department for International Development, to the European Union, to the Canadian equivalent, as well as to some outstanding Jamaican businesses. And we thank them for their contribution, and we urge that they sustain that contribution, not only in Jamaica, but across our region. No doubt there's a long way to go. In particular, the judicial and national integrity systems across the region, including Jamaica's, integrity commissions and anti-corruption bodies, need to be more effective in apprehending, in investigating, and successfully prosecuting corruption cases. in particular against highly placed law enforcement officials, against highly placed government officials, and well-connected facilitators. Our national security policy is very eloquent on this. We not only have to go after the shotters in the streets, the people who are pulling the trigger, you have to go against facilitators, a respectable tie and jacket, those who have the means. 119 high-powered weapons a few months ago intercepted at our port in Montego Bay coming from Miami. That is no tear-up-pants youth on the road with money to bring in 119 high-powered weapons. So we have to go after the facilitators in professions like law, real estate, and business, of whom our national security policy speaks. So I say, jail the corrupt in high places when they violate the law and when they are convicted in a court of law, and build public awareness at all levels. And you will see a sea change in our people's restoration of confidence in our institutions and their involvement in the fight against corruption. Our partners have long commented on this deficiency, and our people remain distressed by it. In Jamaica, however, the light at the end of the tunnel is that more and more of Jamaican people are using the hotlines, and every single one of our commission must have a hotline, anonymous hotline, where people can call in. Hotlines both of private and governmental agencies to report perceived criminal and corrupt activities. In the case of our NIA, our legal advice and assistance center, we have seen a 30% increase in persons calling or coming in to report complaints and to ask for interventions this year. Hence, I conclude that to succeed and to be more effective, we have to be stronger advocates for anti-corruption institutions to be better resourced, enjoy necessary levels of autonomy and authority and full powers of investigation, and most of all, our commissions and anti-corruption bodies have to privilege the public awareness building and the prosecutorial components of your activity. Similarly, the NGOs and civil society bodies, as they have emerged or are emerging in Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, the Bahamas, need to really focus their attention on building public awareness, on constructive engagement with the government and anti-corruption bodies, and enhancing the capacity of the people to speak out, to stand up, and as we say in our commercial advertisement, to do the right thing, not only in elections, but in between, in everyday life, in public affairs, and in their own personal conduct. No doubt, the level of protests relating to corruption, and even more generally, are very low in our region. In fact, in 2014, on the Latin American Public Opinion Project scale, Jamaica had the lowest levels of protests in the entire Western Hemisphere. No doubt that is the case. We're nowhere compared to Brazil, or South Korea, or the Philippines, or Indonesia, or South Africa, when it comes to the people taking to the street, nor are we anywhere near what the Caribbean was in the 1970s and 80s. This, however, does not mean that our people are indifferent or are not involved. They may well be frustrated, but frustration challenges us to find the ways to engage them, to develop other forms of impactful activity until such times, if and when they become necessary, as you know, our people will, once again, engage in protests. In those forms of activity, we have to find, until that day comes, the means, particularly through traditional and social media channels, utilizing opinion surveys and citizen petitions, to which the authorities increasingly find themselves compelled to respond. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I hope in the days ahead that we shall share experiences and good practices in counting the real cost of corruption in our jurisdictions and in better engaging all sections of our people in this historic fight of our time to strengthen integrity and to build a better life for our people and our region. As I wish this 4th annual conference all the very best, I recall the declaration coming from the 16th annual International Anti-Corruption Conference held in Kuala Lumpur, where I attended along with 1,000 delegates from 130 countries in 2015. And that declaration stated, and here I quote, "Today, around the world, we see that corruption manifests itself at the highest levels of political power and business. It is essential to ensure that investigative and judicial bodies remain independent and autonomous. It is essential that threats against civil society be stopped and the voice of the people be encouraged. Now more than ever," the declaration continued, "we must all come together to promote integrity and to take action in a concerted effort against the abuse of entrusted power." End of quotes. May I suggest that this be our call to action arising from this 4th annual conference of the Commonwealth Caribbean Associations of Integrity Commissions and Anti-Corruption Bodies. Thank you very much for the very special welcome which many of us, all of us, have received in this wonderful country. And it's so good to see my former student speaking as she did and holding the position that she does, as well as my long-standing friend, Washi, sitting side by side almost and upholding the same cause. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Monroe, for what I would say was a very informative, timely, and indeed very educational presentation, counting the real cost of corruption, engaging everyone in the fight. Can we give him another hand? I invite us now to stand again as I invite Her Excellency Mrs. Anya Williams, the acting governor of the Turks and Caicos Islands, to declare this 4th conference of the Commonwealth Caribbean Association of Integrity Commissions and Anti-Corruption Bodies officially open.
Thank you. Please be seated. I echo the comments of the chair lady regarding Professor Monroe's speech, which was quite riveting this afternoon and certainly an earful for us all to take away. I greet everyone in their respective capacities and would like to start by stating what a privilege it is for me to officially declare open this 4th annual conference of the Commonwealth Caribbean Association of Integrity Commissions and Anti-Corruption Bodies. This afternoon, the theme for this conference throughout the week is counting the real cost of corruption, engaging everyone in the fight, and what a fitting theme it is. As we would have heard from the presentations earlier this afternoon, corruption exists in hundreds of forms, and whether measured in dollars and yen and euros and pesos, whatever the currency may be, it costs not millions, not billions, but trillions of dollars each year. But in addition to the monetary cost, I believe the greatest cost of corruption is the impact on our societies. I believe that it is the impact that corruption has in helping to erode the moral fabric of our society and breeding contempt and breeding mistrust and dishonesty. Those are the real costs of corruption. I believe that we all in the region would have had our experiences with corruption, and it's important for us not to look at what we've been through and the experiences that we've had, but what we've learned from those experiences and where we are today. As we all work to strengthen and to build our institutions of good governance and to fight corruption, it is important that we assess where we are, It is important that we assess what have been our successes and also what has been our challenges. It is important that we seek to engage everyone in the fight, helping first to acknowledge that we have a problem with corruption, helping to define what corruption is, and putting in place institutions and programs and processes to address that. Corruption doesn't only exist at the political and the senior level. It exists in every facet of society. And so it's important for us to get to the root of what breeds corruption. It is important for us to try to tackle these areas. I believe that this week is an important week for each of you as you sit together and you network and you come together to build solutions for how we address these problems. I would like to personally thank the Ccaicb and the Commonwealth Secretariat for facilitating this conference. I'm grateful that Turks and Caicos has the opportunity to be chair and to share the experiences that we've had here. I'm grateful for the Commonwealth Secretariat for all the work that they do in Turks and Caicos because they partner on us with a number of programs, particularly with our House of Assembly, offering much vital training. And so we're certainly grateful to that, and we're grateful to the government for seeing fit as well to partner in this exercise. I hope that you would all come out of this week feeling refreshed and renewed. Yours are not easy jobs. You're not always the most popular agencies. But I hope that you would be able to come together and that persons will be able to see value from the work that you do. Certainly we have seen it, and we want the community to see it as well, not only to see it, but to join in being a part of the fight against corruption. Thank you.
You may be seated. Thanks. Mrs. Imtonesia McCartney-Pear, the Secretary of CCAI-CACB, will now come with a vote of thanks. In the words of Oscar Wilde, the smallest act of kindness is worth more than the grandest intention. And so with this sentiment, we hope to express to you our thanks and our gratitude. Her Excellency, Mrs. Anya Williams, Acting Governor, Honorable Premier, Mrs. Charlene Codlight Robinson, Honorable Speaker of the House, Mr. Dwayne Taylor, Leader of the Opposition, Honorable Washington Mizik, Chief Justice, members of Cabinet, members of the House of Assembly, feature addressee, Professor Trevor Monroe, our most valued invited guests from the Commonwealth Caribbean Associations of Integrity Commissions and anti-corruption bodies, institutions of good governance, permanent secretaries, and other government officials, statutory bodies, private sector, media, commissioners, and staff of the Turks and Caicos Islands Integrity Commission, including former commissioners, distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It is my privilege to have been asked to propose the vote of thanks on this auspicious occasion, the 4th annual conference for the CCAI-CACB. I, on behalf of the chairman of the Commonwealth Caribbean Association of Integrity Commissions and Anti-Corruption Bodies, the Commonwealth Secretariat, and the local organizing committee, extend our heartfelt gratitude to all persons on the program. Our very abled chairperson, Reverend Julia Williams, and former commissioner, for a job well done. Long Bay High School Choir and Steel Pan Band for their melodious rendition of the national anthem and national song. Mr. Eugene Atanye, QC, Chair of the Association and Director of the Integrity Commission, for his remarks, where he shared his aspiration for the Turks and Caicos Islands people, beautiful by nature, corruption-free by choice.
Dr. Roger Corenting for his remarks, where he charged us to be game changers, and the General Secretary's virtual remarks, the Right Honorable Patricia Scotland, for reminding us that it is vital for everyone to be involved and that succeed we must. Ms. Desmercy Lugo for her vibrant poem, reminding us to be responsible citizens and also reminding us that we're one people and there's one fight. For Mr. David Boeing and company, who showcased TCI's culture, sharing with us the things in his grip and the TCI national colors, and for the youth who clearly explained who we are as Turks and Caicos Islanders. Thank you all. We were all inspired by your great participation and your great words. We also thank the Honorable Premier who brought extraordinary remarks. Thank you. And our acting governor who so ably declared the conference open. I take this opportunity also to extend our most sincere thanks to all our guest invitees who have come from different destinations for their support and cooperation. I also wish to express profound gratitude to Professor Trevor Monroe. Thank you for your realistic and practical GDP examples and the example you shared, even with the 1% reduction in corruption for Jamaica alone, for providing us with the important challenge of successful prosecution for the untouchables and the importance of public awareness, and the various other illustrations that you shared. Thanks for successfully delivering on our theme, counting the real cost of corruption, engaging everyone in the fight. Thanks also to Grenada, Trinidad, and Jamaica for their assistance and support in planning this conference. An event of this dimension cannot happen overnight. It requires meticulous planning and execution and an eye for details. And so I thank you for the role that you've played. I cannot thank everyone enough for their involvement they have shown and the willingness they have expressed to take on the completion of tasks, even beyond their comfort zones. Thanks to Ms. Tanya Swan and the Beaches team, Mrs. Tracy Parker, Clerk to the House of Assembly, our protocol officers from the Ministry of Border Control, Mr. Backles and the Cadet Corps within the Department of Youth Affairs, got you covered for this wonderful display of flags, Clement Howell High School, their community club members who assisted with ushering, Blueprint Media for sound and video recording, and other media agencies who are present to promote this event. Thanks to all of you for your presence, Madam Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, because no duty is more urgent than that of returning thanks, in the words of James Allen. Once again, I want to state that we are all most grateful to all who have contributed in some way to make this 4th annual conference opening ceremony of the Ccaicb successful, and simply say thanks, thanks, and thanks again. I thank you one and all.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this opening ceremony, and the protocol officers will escort the officials to the media room, and the rest of us will remain for a few minutes as we are serenaded by the Long Bay High School band, after which we will all be escorted to the poolside for a reception. Thank you very much for participating. Thank you very much for your attendance, and may God bless all of you.